Oh, so yeah.
School projects.
Oh, great.
Actually, that school project, after I rolled up, you go 3 days until, well, say, to a pet one, and we got to eat all the stuff that was
Yeah, fertilizer.
Sure. I just inherited some green pepper plants because they were part of this science fair project.
That's nice.
Yeah, they're not in the best shape, but free plants. Okay.
We're live whenever you like.
All right, go ahead. Who's up next? First up. This is just my intro. So what we're giving. Oh, absolutely.
I want to thank everybody for the inaugural, for coming out for the inaugural speaker series talk on home composting for the 2025-2026 season. I already have most of the rest of the months for between now and June already scheduled, so keep an eye on our website. I will do my best to make sure you guys are in the loop. The other ones are mostly on Wednesday nights. Hopefully you'll be able to turn out for them. Our next one is going to be a waste reduction and art project thing. So like it'll be a make and take while you learn about how to reduce how much trash you actually produce. So we got two kind of less waste things back to back. And then in the beginning of the year, we're gonna have some native plant things, some butterfly things. We're gonna have all kinds of great talks coming up. So looking forward to that. My name is Amy Leonard. I'm the wildlife educator with Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. My lovely assistant, Michael, who is our operations manager, who's done all the tech setting up. And we have Greg Sobel with us today, who's a master gardener from the University of Florida, and a bunch of other hats that he wears that are not today's particular hat.
Sure.
So thank you so much for coming out, Greg. Appreciate it.
So yeah, we are sponsored by University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. We're 60% sponsored by UF, and every county does their own 40%, and the other 40% is for the counties. Every county in Florida does have agricultural extension office. And years ago, this presentation was created by Ellen Book, who ironically I just found out works at the downtown library. Pinecrest? Oh, I met her downtown, right? I just love that her last name is Book. And she created this a number of years ago to convince people why they should be composting. I figured we're all past that, so I've been revamping it over the last few weeks, gearing it to how to compost and how to compost more efficiently. And I am Greg Sobel, and currently I manage the Botany Lab and Gardens at Miami-Dade College, their North Campus, which is in fact the next slide. Wink, wink. And at the beginning of the summer, I was walking through the garden, and we had one of those huge storms coming in. And I hadn't had a picture in a while. Where I'm standing, there's 5 or 6 starfruit trees, mango trees, I just planted 10 avocados. I have about 1,100 square feet of raised beds, and then behind those 2 domes in the back, I have another, what we're calling like a food forest area. There's papayas and soursop and mulberries. I just put in something called hogfruit, yellow hogfruit, ocotes they're known as. The dean who helped me find the funding for that insisted I put in hogfruit. So I've got about 1,200 things, and I was recently at an organic farming workshop, and I realized, one of the things that I realized is I'm not a farmer. I don't farm the land. I'm not doing this to make my living. What I'm really doing is just large scale backyard gardening. You might have 2 or 3 beds in your yard. I just happen to have about 60. You've got a couple of mango trees. I've got about 60 or 70 mango trees, among other things. And during the pandemic, when I was there, our botanist who hired me, he retired. And when I came back, I was missing a lot of skills. I went through the Master Gardener program. And this shed right over here was full of promix soils. And anytime I'd finish with the bed, I'd just add more promix. I didn't worry about it. And after about 2 years, though, and after the pandemic, I ran out of soil. And the next year, my crop was just terrible. And I realized, I found myself at the age of 50 in the library looking for soil science books. And I realized I need to do a lot more composting. I do some other things as well, cover cropping, because we didn't have the funds just to keep adding soil and compost and buying supplies. So I started composting, and I do small scale composting at home like you guys do. And just over the last 2 years, I've really taken it to another level, trying to get more and more efficient at it. and use it more efficiently as well.
What are the raised beds?
There's a number of things. So this was the end of the summer, so a lot of my crops were dying off, and I started adding these beds that look like they're throwing corn in it here. You can see some here. This is actually a combination. It's two cover crops. One is a legume to add nitrogen. The other one is called a sorghum sedangrass, which is a hybrid that scavenges nitrogen, and then you just chop it down and put it back in. I was at this at that organic farming thing. They told me, they're like, yeah, just use your tractor and till it. I'm like, I don't know, no power tools. So I have to chop everything by hand, but I get students who volunteer and help me out a lot with it. Like the last things that were alive, there's some collard greens over here I can see. This was kale. Most everything else had died by this point. These are sweet potatoes. So we do a lot of stuff. So why do we compost in the first place? A lot of it is to re-enrich our soil. Use our garden wastes, our kitchen wastes. I'm sure if you guys are gardening, a lot of this stuff can be expensive. Fertilizers, anything you're doing with pesticides, new soil, that sort of stuff. So by composting, we can take those nutrients that we could throw away and break them down, recycle them, and put them back into our garden beds. The more organic matter you have in your beds, you will conserve it. It holds the water, so you'll retain it. It costs less in water. Lowers greenhouse emissions. It doesn't produce as much carbon dioxide and methane, and it reduces landfill wastes, which is my next slide. Perfect. Here in Florida, we have 75 landfills. This was as of last year when she wrote this, or when she got the stats for last year. About 20 to 30% of the waste we throw in our landfills could be composted and recycled. So we are putting off a lot of greenhouse gases, contributing to climate change. So, another slide. All right, I want to start with the basics of composting. She actually put this at the end of her slide, and I copied it and put it at the beginning because I was an elementary school teacher for 12 years, and I always like to introduce my topics. And this is kind of the basics. Take a bunch of organic material, which is mostly yard wastes and kitchen wastes, keep it wet. The microorganisms are there anyway. We add water, we make sure we have oxygen. It'll give off heat, it'll give off some carbon dioxide, and over time, you will have your finished compost. There are a lot of little specific details, ins and outs. The good thing about what we do is that everything's eventually going to break down. Here in South Florida, between the heat and the humidity, you can probably, if you're really on the ball and want to, you can probably get it down to about 4 months. I'm not that particular. I usually do about 2 batches a year. I do 3 months, and then I kind of transfer to a return pile, and I start over. So it takes me about 6 months to get a finished product out of it. There are people, I find people online who have like thermometers, and they're taking the temperature twice a day, and they're turning it, and they're doing this, and they're buying stuff to add to their pile. I'm like, no. But you could probably get it down to about 4 months if you really wanted to do that. But I don't find the need for that as a gardener. As somebody who grows edible foods, it's patience. Patience is really important. If you're in a hurry, you're going to wait anyway. So before I go on though, does anybody have any questions right now before I get started going into the details?
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a compost which is like a circular thing that's open up. It's about 3 foot across.
What's it made of?
I put it on Amazon. It's got this kind of black with this hanging board.
It's perforated. Okay.
It's perforated, but I didn't put anything underneath it, and I'm worried that the compost goodness is going to.
It won't.
No, it's staying.
The best thing to put under, and I'll talk about it, is like a layer of branches or leaves.
Okay.
But yeah, you want it open to the ground. Really, microworms and insects and things are going to get into it, and you want it open on the
And
bottom.
then when it's full, like I leave that one and start the next one. And then
We'll talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
That's some of the ins and outs and the particulars. It's a good question.
Okay.
Anything else?
There is now a particular percentage between green and brown.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too. And it's not as important as some people make it out to be.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Let's talk about that. Okay, so your goal, and you're probably not going to be able to achieve this at home, is what's called hot composting. The reason you won't accomplish that at home is because it takes something that's about 1 cubic yard. These boxes, these are what I used to work. These are 3 by 3 by 3, which is 27 cubic feet, which is 1 cubic yard. And you need that much mass biomass the size of that to really get hot enough. And it gets hot enough to kill seeds, pathogens, nematodes, any of the problems that you have. So ideally, that's what you want. I will talk about another way you can sterilize your soil if you really have to. But this is what hot composting is. And this is what I had at work. I took this picture about 2 weeks ago. I have 2 bins. One of them is my work. I call it my working bin. It's what I'm always throwing stuff into. You know, I cut a plant out or carambolas. I have such a windy area that the carambolas, my starfruit, are always falling off the trees. I throw them in there. When it gets full, I move them to a maturing pile. And this, like I said, this takes me about 3 months to fill, and then I let it mature for about 3 months as well. You asked me about greens and browns, and we'll talk about that. I have a third bin. So this is my 2.5 bin system. This is where I keep browns. Usually I have students who break up leaves. The gardeners in the summer when it's wet, the lawnmowers trail grass cuttings, we break those up and I have that as well. And when I transfer from the working pile to the maturing pile, I'll layer it using some of these browns. Okay. And at home, though, I realized, go ahead and hit the next slide. At home, this is my picture from my space at home. I have a very similar system. This is my working pile. This is my maturing pile. You can see it's covered in wood shavings. This is where I keep my browns and my leaf molding, which is empty now because I used to over there. And I'm a big fan in not spending money on composting. I want to put my money into my garden. I don't put my time and money into the garden. What's that?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I don't. You know, you can if you really want to, but you shouldn't be. This container I ordered online for like $15. This is what I keep in my kitchen. This goes in my kitchen, and you can see there's eggshells, there's cantaloupe, there's coffee grounds in there, and once, 2 times a week, depending on how much I use, that goes into my working bin. This is like 3 by 3, but it's only about 1 feet high, so I don't get the heat needed to. So I'm careful about I never throw weeds in my compost at home because I know it's not going to get hot enough. This trellis. My neighbor was one of my neighbors. The bricks were lining my fence line. The people before me had a dog, so they had lined bricks, so it couldn't dig its way out. And this was a shelf that we had to get rid of and replace. So there's nothing in here that I paid for. And all my garden kitchen scraps go in here. Eventually they go over here, and then they go into my garden bins. Okay, so you can do this at home. And like I said, for years I was just using like a plastic wooden bowl. They're the salad bowls made of plastic that look like wood. It finally came apart, and I ordered something online specific. I spent whatever that was, $15, $12 or $15. It's the only thing I've ever spent for composting per se. Okay. Here's some alternatives. Recycled pallets are fantastic. Because I work on a college, they're always all around when I can find them. Old wiring, fencing. I know somebody who bought somebody's old hurricane shutters from a garage sale. They just recycled it, they upgraded their windows. Plywood works too, if you've got it or you want to buy it, because plywood's not too expensive. This day, she talks about an underfelted carpet, which I don't think you need. Sometimes here in Miami, when it's the dry season, which is coming up, and it gets really hot, but it's still dry, you may want to cover your bins to help conserve water, but you don't need to.
I just have I have a concrete block against a wall.
Perfect.
That's what I'm doing.
Right.
That I can reconfigure if I need to, but just another.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Yeah, cinder blocks are great. I know I have a neighbor who I was borrowing cinder blocks for projects. I try. We're recycling. Don't do something new. You want to recycle whatever you can. Okay. Any other questions about materials, by the way? Building your bins. Plywood, by the way, it is safe to use pressure-treated wood these days, especially for a composting bin. So if you do want to buy something, don't be threatened by, because most plywood nowadays is pressure-treated, so it doesn't break down. So since you probably can't hot compost at your houses, what we typically do is either cold bin composting. I call it warm bin composting because it's not quite. It does get warm. It just won't get hot enough to kill the seeds of pathogens. This is kind of lazy man composting too. You fill your bin halfway with browns, bury in some kitchen scraps, and just leave it. Like I said, things have been breaking down before humans got involved in this stuff. Decomposition has been going on for millions of years, so it's going to break down. This process probably just takes closer to down here 9 to 12 months as opposed to 4 to 6 months. Sheet composting is fantastic idea to do for the summer. I have sources, and you may have sources. I'll talk about getting manure, and you cover with manure or compost if you have it, and if your kitchen scraps. But it takes a lot. If you've got like a good-sized garden bed, it takes a lot to get like a 2-inch layer. So I go out and get horse manure, and I cover with. I use a lot of palm fronds. We have a palmita network, but you can use grass. You can use hay. It's fantastic. I'm always raking up leaves and putting into that third bin of mine, so I always have grounds available. I'll go across the street and make my neighbor's lawn too. He's got an oak tree. Just so I have things like this. Yeah, I don't want to spend them. I need it. And then what happens is the manure, your compost, will break down over the summer. It'll interact with the browns you have on top. And then when it's this time of year when you're getting your garden set, you just mix it all into the top layer. You've got compost ready to go. Trench composting works really well. It's a fantastic method, but I don't like it because you're doing it in your garden beds. You dig a trench, and over the course of the summer or the year, you put your compost through that. And then at the end, when you fill it up, you cover it up and let it sit for a few months. And then when you start gardening in there, you've already got the compost, the soil underneath, ready to go. If you're like me, you have tons of spaces where you can't grow fruits in gardens. I don't want to waste my garden space with a trench with composting in my garden space. So it does work really well. I just don't like doing it because it takes away from their actual gardening. And I don't know much about bokashi buckets. I've never used one, but this is an in-home system that you do in your kitchen, and it uses an anaerobic bacterial inoculant. So it works without oxygen. And the finished product isn't exactly compost, it still has to be finished. And you do have to purchase the inoculant, which is another thing. But apparently they work really well. People who have them are very happy with them. It comes out as a fertilizer more as not really a compost. So any questions about any of these other methods? Okay.
Is the composting would be like the one that uses worms? Like, because what they used to have was designed to have worms on them, so it's just gone.
They all do, but like we were talking earlier, if the bottom's open, the worms are going to find it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and this is like I said, this if you're gonna add water and turn it on a regular basis, it's going to warm up a little bit more, and it's going to go a little quicker than this. Oxygen, huge factor, which we'll talk about more. I kind of don't want to talk about the sciences just yet. We'll get there. Okay. This is that method I talked about earlier. It's called soil solarization. And what it's doing is if you do need to sterilize your soil, this is a plastic sheet, and it works like a greenhouse. It holds the heat in, and you keep it there for 6 to 8 weeks, and it will kill. I heard you talk about nematode problems. And it will kill the nematodes. It will kill weed seeds. You don't even have to pull weeds out. If you want to kill off the grass or weeds growing, you cover it up. It will kill anything that's growing in there. Personally, I've found that it also kind of breaks down your soil structure. In order to, you have to add a lot of compost and organic matter to get it back to where it was. And I've done this on occasion because of nematodes, but I don't think I'll do it again. There are other treatments that work a little bit better and don't damage your soil structure. Okay, so you may have heard us talking about a ratio of greens and browns. The greens are your fresh kitchen scraps, freshly cut grass. They have an amount of nitrogen in them, which is what the building blocks, the bacteria that are going to be breaking down your compost require the nitrogen. So that's their fuel for them. Carbon, the browns have a carbon backbone skeleton, and that's the energy source that they need. And you'll see here you need, 1/3 is nitrogen, 2/3 carbon or browns. So it's twice as much brown as green. So when I take my container of compost from my kitchen, I dump it in the back, I might take 2 handfuls of leaves to mix in with it every time. So I keep that ratio going. Sometimes I see the ratio listed as 1:30. And what happens is, in order to get the amount of carbon, you need, it's like these browns come to 30 times as much of the actual carbon structure. There's a lot of waste products in here that are some carbon. So what's more important to us is the amount of stuff we put in. So if you've got, if you've got one foot with those, you think about my kitchen, can you go back to that slide where I had the kitchen compost? One more. Yeah, this. This is a 2-liter container, so if I fill it up, whichever we're doing, and dump that in my compost, I'm gonna want to put twice as much of my leaf matter in there to balance it out. Okay. Any questions about that? All right, going back way. Doing great, Mike. If we go back one, so if you don't like the peaceful, easy to read slide, she made a nice hectic version one. Go ahead. This one has a lot going on here, so green, she talks about nitrogen, which is a protein matter for the building blocks of the bacteria. Which are your greens, your grass clippings, food scraps. Soil microorganisms are going to be going into it. Larger organisms like worms, isopods, pill bugs, things like that are going to get into it. We add water, heat comes out of it. Air has to get into it, and you'll have your compost. I like this better. A lot of people are always asking, what can you compost? What can you compost? Just about anything that's not an animal product from your kitchen can go into it, with a few exceptions. Eggshells, and I have started adding, I don't eat a lot of shrimp, but whenever I do, I take the shells, I actually cut them up with the scissors, so they're a little smaller, and add them to my compost. I do use compost horse manure, but I don't do it with my regular manure, with my regular compost. It's possible, because I'm not feeding the horses, that these horses are getting herbicides in their food, and that herbicide can pass through the horse's body and last for up to 3 years. So you don't want to be composting for 6, 8, 12 months, add it to your garden, and then add herbicides and kill the plants. So there is a test that I do when I'm done composting. I test, I just I use radishes because those are the quickest things that grow, to make sure it's safe to use. I don't recommend it because you might spend 6 to 8 months and find that you can't use it. So at home, you might, unless you have a lot of space, and you will want to try it. Did you have a question?
I have actually two. One is that I did try to use horse manure on a larger area where we were
Right.
and what happened is there was these huge white sort of
The grubs?
grubs.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, like pinky size and
Yeah.
rose colored.
Disgusting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So
Animal.
those are root eating grubs. They're really bad. They'll eat your lawn. If they get into your garden, they'll eat your roots. And the beetles that come out, these big black scarab-looking beetles, will eat fruits and flowers. It's kind of gross, but when I use a sifter at the end, and they get in there, I just kind of squish them through and kind of add their biomass back to my compost.
Yeah.
Go back to the food cycle. Because you don't want those.
And then I think my other question is, why can't you add meat to those or dairy?
So bones like eggshells are organic. They're not going to break down in your compost. If you want to, I was talking earlier about heat. What did you do with them? The bones? You cook them in
I
a pressure
cook them
cooker?
in a pressure cooker.
Yeah, they soften up.
They're very soft at the end.
Right. When you can buy bone meal in a store where they take bones, they bake them till they're brittle, and then they grind them up.
Yeah.
But you would want to add that directly to your garden because it's not going to break down. It's not going to do anything for your compost. So the problem with animal products, meats and fats and dairy too, is that the fats in them will go rancid and they will attract a lot of pests. Rats, roaches, toads, bugs, flies, things like that. Which, if you're isolated, if you're on your farm, it's not going to be a big deal. But most of us live in urban areas with neighbors.
Yeah.
I have enough troubles with my neighbor. I don't want to upset them even more with compost. So I don't add any of that. One exception, in a way, is oils. If you sauteed some vegetables in oil and you had leftovers that you forgot about, feel free to dump them in your compost. It's such a small amount of oil, it's not a big deal. If you deep fried a turkey for Thanksgiving and have, gallons or something, what happens is it clumps up and it becomes anaerobic because air can't get through it, and it becomes raw and it ferments. It's anaerobic decomposition, which is going to smell and attract pests, but even worse, some of the end products are going to be like alcohol and vinegar and acids that are going to kill a lot of your microorganisms. It's going to kill the worms. I don't know how, it's not good for your plants either.
So that doesn't go into landfill, there's nothing we can really do about that.
Correct. Obviously, in interest, treating with pesticides or herbicides, coal and charcoal really isn't good either. And here's, you were asking about keeping the bottom open. It says to line the bottom 4 to 8 inches. again, because I work on a college campus and have students that can help me out, I keep like a bucket full of twigs. You know, like we prune some trees, you know, keep the smaller twigs and line it. Remember that? I was just thinking about there's a kids game called Kerplunk. You've got a cylinder and you put like pegs through it, like long toothpicks, and then put marbles on top. And you pull them out and the marbles fall down. Well, that matrix that you create with all those sticks and twigs allows air to flow through, which will keep it oxygenated from the bottom. So it's a really good thing to do. You can, it's not going to be as, it won't, if you shred it up, is better.
Just one layer.
There's no reason to do that.
Yeah, it's good.
Because it's not going to add oxygen, and eventually things are going to come through. And I mean, you can add cardboard to your compost if you shred it up, because it can just clump up, and it's hard to work.
As a layer on the bottom.
Say again?
I used to as a layer on the bottom to put the bin on top.
You
Strew it with the soil.
don't need to do that. Keeping your compost moist is important, and aerating it is important too for the oxygen factor. We'll talk more about that coming up. Other things, paper with ink. If you're talking about like those cardboard boxes I see in the back that usually might have like some black ink on them, it's usually soy-based ink, and those are fantastic. The newspapers on my college campus is recycled paper, and they use soy-based ink as well. I won't put that on my newspaper tends to clump up and it's really hard to work. But I use that like as like a landscape fabric instead of buying a weed screen. I'll use newspapers. But the shiny boxes and like magazine type paper, you don't want to use that. I don't know what they're using to preserve that. All those chemicals are not good for your garden or you. This is my favorite. Every day I'm still pulling these out of my garden. You know, these little stickers.
Oh, yeah, I know.
These are the stickers on your avocados, your bananas, your apples, and you know, I never eat that. The good news is they're non-toxic. Years ago, they discovered people were eating them, and the paper, the ink, the adhesive, it's all non-toxic, but it does not decompose. If you eat it, it will just pass through you safely. And eventually, I throw them in the compost, and eventually, I'm picking them out of my garden.
Yeah.
This morning, I was transplanting some lettuce, and I pulled 2 of them out and just laughed. It's just, they're so small, it's going to happen. What's that? They don't really damage. They're just, they're not going to break down, and they're not great for your garden. Next. I think this slide was made up for people who have like a citrus grove and might have a huge harvest and they like use hundreds of them to make juice and end up with all those peels. And I would kind of treat that almost like manure and do it separately, mix it with leaves. But if you're, if you have an orange or a lemon here and there, just cut it up. My one problem with grapefruits, like if you scoop them out, have a whole grapefruit or like half an avocado, it always ends up face up and then it gets filled with water and then 8 days later you have mosquitoes coming out of it. So just chop everything up.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the next slide mentions surface area. The smaller you chop things up, the more surface area, the more the bacteria can attack it, and the quicker it's going to go as well. So even things like, when I cut like the edge of a pineapple off, I'm going to cut that up into 3 or 4 pieces just to make them smaller. Eventually, it's easier to work later on, when you're turning the bins, and it breaks down a lot faster if you cut it up smaller too. So here's an amount thing, and I don't do some of this, but things you can do if you have access to them. Your browns, 2/3 as much as your browns, 1/3 is your greens. Some bulk sticks. As you work sticks and they move around, they're going to create air spaces, which is great for your compost. Excuse me. And then add your eggshells. Just throw them in. Like I said, they're not really going to break down your compost, but they will break up. They'll get into your garden eventually, and it takes about a year or so for it to really become available to your plants. But those minerals will be there for your plants. And I know people who bake their eggshells and then use a spice grinder and pulverize them, and powder them up, and just add them. But add that to your garden. That'll go to your garden. That doesn't need to be in your compost. It's not going to do anything for your compost. It's for your garden. Location. One thing I would recommend is keep it close to your hose and water supply. We will, during our dry months, need to keep it damp and add water to it. My philosophy is Miami is hot. I don't want to work in the sun. I keep it in the shade. It can dry out in the sun quicker than it does in the shade, but it's really just a matter of convenience. And if you've got neighbors who you may not want to upset, keep it away from them. Keep it nice, nice bins like this. You can see this was made out of recycled pallets. And the question is, and I would keep it directly away from your house. I listened to a webinar about it was for rats and termites, pests in your homes. And one of the things I learned though is you need to keep an inspection line, a view of the bottom of your house, maybe for termites, but rats as well. And you don't want to plant things right. You want to be able to see where your house meets the ground, just to make sure nothing's going on there. So you really shouldn't keep plants or your compost bin right next to your house.
Would you have any idea where regular old homeowners like us could find pallets?
Yeah, they go to hardware stores. Big hardware stores, they take them, they load their stuff in. The bigger stores have, they get their supplies on pallets.
Okay.
They put that. You don't want the painted ones. They tend to reuse those, and I don't know what's in the paint, so that's not safe. But the other ones are one time. They're really used. They're built for one-time use. They're not treated in any way, and they're ready to use.
Thank you.
So yeah, look, find big stores that have like Costco, BJ's, hardware stores, the big box stores, and you'll find them out back. I have neighbors who, every now and then end up with one, and they put it out, look around.
I see it.
Down in the house.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we learn as a gardener is, how important soil is. And what composting does is it you're feeding the soil and the microbes and the living component of your soil. Because otherwise, if it's not living, then your fertilizers go to feeding the plants directly. Synthetic fertilizers, they feed the plants, they don't do anything for your soil. The compost that we're creating is going to provide nutrients and microorganisms that go into the living part of your soil, which then produce and help grow your plants. So what we're talking about doing is making something, a product that's going to help your soil, which will help your plants, as opposed to taking fertilizer, which will just help your plants. Okay. These are some of the living components of your plants, starting with, your organic matter is going to be your food, your fuel, fuel. That's the part. Fungi, molds, bacteria are going to start to break it down. Bacteria, especially protozoans, smaller insects are going to start to feed on them. Larger guys are going to come in. Earthworms, millipedes, centipedes. I even have those little blind snakes that look like worms that are in there. This is my only exception for cockroaches. When I see them in my compost, I ignore them. They're doing their decomposition thing, breaking down food. And what you don't think about it, but a lot of what you want in your garden is bug manure. As they're going to the bathroom, they're making excrement, they're dying. All their nutrients are going to feed your plants. There's a prettier picture. The next slide. The same kind of thing. A little garden, just here, more like a forest view. With the microbes, bigger things, plants, fungi, all sorts of stuff. It's a healthy ecosystem. You want your plants growing in a healthy ecosystem, and you're going to feed that. At the bottom of that food ecosystem, that food chain, is going to be your compost and your soil. I think we were talking about kids' science fair projects earlier. That's what this looks like to me. This one was grown in a bokashi bin. This was grown with simple, conventional fertilizer. This was your control group grown in just plain soil. That was grown in compost. But yeah, like I said, I hear great things about it. I just don't know about it, and I'm not the person who's going to spend money on it. It's an indoor container that works anaerobically, and you have to inoculate. You have to buy an inoculant that you sprinkle on it. It's like here, it's like $20 to $40 a year, which isn't terrible. But and your end product is not compost. It has to be taken a step further once it's done. But it only takes like a week or two, from what I understand. Okay. So if you've got, I know somebody mentioned a big bin like this. This is ideal for hot composting. It's really hard to fill up in our backyards. But what I love about this picture is you can actually see the layers. They had compost, they had hay, and then probably some greens they just chopped down. They harvested something and had the leftovers. And you can see the hay, the soil, the compost, the greens, the different layers. While you're setting this up, spray it down, get it wet right from the beginning. Aerate it, mix it regularly. And like I said, it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. It'll heat up and start to break down. It's got to be turned, and then it still takes a few months to finish once it's done with the hot composting. And remember, eventually it's all going to get mixed up anyway. So layering, if you have the ability to layer, it's a great way to go. It's the most efficient way to go. But if you're doing like I do in my backyard, where once a week you pour your compost out and add a little bit, it's not going to have this sort of. The geo bins we give out, there's actually a video at the end of this that shows how to do it. But essentially, you fill it up with your layers as best you can, and the inside is going to start breaking down first. That's kind of where this dark spot is here. And then what they do is they take off the outer layer, which is still green, put that in the center on the bottom, and then take the middle bottom part and add that on top. And that video that we have will show you how to do that a little better. So aeration is what you need to keep your aerobic bacteria alive. That's what you want. Anaerobic, I don't know why, anaerobic microbes stink, but the smell to me is not the problem. It's the fact that they're going to start fermenting, giving you those end products that you don't want to compost in your garden. Okay. And while you're turning, it's a great time to check for moisture. It should feel like a wet sponge. Imagine squeezing out a sponge and then the damp sponge that you have afterwards is ideal. That's why you should keep your compost bins near your water supply, because you may have to water it. I've never used one of these. I'm a big fan of the pitchfork, a hay fork, but this sort of thing, you just put it down, twist it, and it kind of pulls it up, creating air spaces underneath, mixing it up, and adding air into your beds.
But I find that using that is.
I'm sorry?
I used to have one of those.
Did you like it?
No, because I used, I had a lot of avocado seeds and mango seeds that would just, I throw in there, so everything would be just like intertwined, and I wouldn't be able to use it so effectively.
So yeah, here's the pitchfork. It's so easy, especially at the beginning when you've got bigger things and twigs in there. It's so easy to use the hay fork to turn everything. Eventually, you'll want to use a shovel towards the end, because it can fall through pitchfork. It will break down smaller. Okay. It's all about balance. Thanks. This was cute. This is not mine. I can't take credit. This is not my style, but I like it. You can see the different layers. Cute little rodent of some sort. But we lost our kids. We lost our child audience. So okay. Before I get to some technical and some scientific sort of stuff, does anybody have any questions you want to ask up here right now?
Well, I had issues with the cockroaches because they were kind of like, I know that they're positive things, but they're just so.
In your garden. I won't keep them in my house. I don't think I have them in my house.
No. Yes, but I felt that I was just, even though they were reproducing, that I was just, kind of like making perfect conditions for them to grow. And I'm like, how do I just, I don't want.
You know, you
I
can,
don't want that. I don't want that.
You don't want to. No, they're really different. I understand.
I imagine just like they have like rat baits, they make a roach bait that you can put out that they can feed on. You don't want, obviously like a spray isn't going to work in this sort of situation. You can't spray yourself, but if you can find some kind of rat bait, roach bait that they can eat and that'll kill them, you can look for that.
Because my issue with roaches is because it's just they walk on me, like it's not like.
Yeah, no. When I see a roach, I get irrational too. I don't want roaches, but.
I don't like them, but they still walking on me when I was working on the compost.
But like I said, like even if I turn on the light in my kitchen, there's a roach. I'm not me. I'm suddenly I'm a 10-year-old screaming, maniac.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I understand, but.
I know. No, I love maybe, but I guess.
You need some good snake habitat, so the snakes will take out, the black racers will take out your cockroaches.
Yeah, when I'm at
No, a lot of the cats. I love cockroaches.
at work, I have 2 huge mounds of when I prune trees and branches, I make just a huge pile of it because snakes should like that. I right now have I have some other larger wildlife which are taking care of my snakes and my rodents, and I don't really have a big problem right now. But it's supposed to, I forget what they call it when you just pile up a pile of branches. because that will attract snakes. Of course, you're living with neighbors, you may want to be careful with that.
Well, I'm living in an apartment, it's not gonna be, so I'm trying to see how I do composting.
Yeah, that's not gonna work. Yeah. But you may want to look into those bokashi bins.
Yes,
Because that's a good way. So there are like three, well, they classify bacteria a lot of ways, but in this case, there's cold phase bacteria, which we don't worry about because we live in Miami. There are medium temperature bacteria, which is what's everywhere around us, which is going to be your main composters. And there is a really hot version called thermophiles, which those are the ones that are going to really quickly attack the proteins, the fats, the complex carbohydrates. And that's such a high energy fuel that they're going to get really hot. Those are the ones that can bring your compost up to that 140, 150 degree temperature that will kill pathogens and kill weed seeds. That's the goal of hot composting. When you set up, like when you see that bin set up with different layers, it takes like 4 to 5 days to shoot up to that temperature. Eventually, those layers where they interface, they're gonna run out of fuel. That's one of the reasons why you mix it up. The temperature will go down, you mix it up a little bit more, the temperature goes back up, you're mixing the thermophiles with the fuel. But that can only last so long, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month or so. And then it cools back down to this 100, 105 degree mesophile phase, which here in Miami I find takes about 2 to 3 more months to finish up your compost, if you can get it that high to begin with. Okay. So here's where the mesophiles are, from room temperature up to about 105 degrees. Once it starts getting that high, the thermophiles take over. And if you've got enough biomass and enough in the right ratios of fuel, it will bring up right here to this optimal range. Too hot, and the bacteria will actually kill themselves off by producing too much heat. At that point, you turn it again, you add water to cool it down. Because people do that, and I know people who they're always asking me for thermometer recommendations. I really don't know what I don't use them. I'm not that interested. But they're kind of like a cooking thermometer with a long peg that goes in. It takes the thermometer so you can see the temperature. And like I said, it can only last in this range for a few weeks, and then it cools back down, and you need to let it mature again for a few months. Here's the thermometer. Here's a thermometer. Like I said, I don't really use them, but if you're concerned and you want to start doing that hot composting, it's a great way to start off and make sure you're in that range. And time is a critical factor. Don't rush your compost. Your goal isn't to compost. Your goal is to garden, I imagine. You want to, I meet people who sometimes get that confused. They want their compost. They're trying to make compost, and I'm using compost to make my garden. So don't rush it. You can actually early compost. There's a couple slides here that talk about using compost too early. It's not good for your plants. And I'll explain why when we get to the slides, which might be coming up. Okay, so here's the slide that I put at the beginning, just to show you, and hopefully by now you kind of understand this a bit more. Taking all your organic matter with nitrogen in it, the water and microbes, keeping it damp, keeping it aerated, creating heat, creating finished compost. Okay. So this is actually the first year of composting, and you can still see some of the structure of what they were putting into it. This is the second year, it's looking good. Third year, this took place in Alaska, where they only have a short summer season, and it just takes so much longer in the cool because they don't have their temperature, they don't have the same bacteria. Their bacteria are more of the cooler bacteria, which should just go much slower. This is a screen. I use one just like this. I had one built. I had a colleague who does woodworking, and I had them build it to fit perfectly onto my wheelbarrow so that I can screen everything out right into my wheelbarrow and then move it out to where I need it. Big chunks, they just go back in. This is a good thing to line your next, the new compost pile for your next thing. This is a good place to get rid of those big bugs. This is a 1/2-inch screen. They don't fit through that. You just smoosh them in and wear gloves. When you're wearing gloves, please keep in mind that your compost is full of bacteria.
Yeah.
I wash my hands anyway, but I don't want to really touch that if I can help it. So I'm wearing gloves all the time when I'm doing this. If you get some grubs, you push them through and add it back to the food chain. and then wash up anyway, because I don't know what's getting through. Oh, so there's two problems with using unfinished compost. One of them is that some plants actually have, they produce toxins that prevent other plants from growing, and maybe hormones. I know like sunflowers put out a chemical in their roots that hinder root crops. Like you don't companion plant potatoes with sunflowers. It hinders the growth of the sunflowers. So some of these toxins, if you haven't composted them fully, will continue and get into your plants and kill your plants. And also, if you remember, the bacteria are feeding on nitrogen. Nitrogen is also our main fertilizer. So if you're composting and these bacteria are active in your garden beds, they're going to be taking the nitrogen that your plant needs and stunting their growth, possibly even killing it. So we don't want to do that's why we don't do our composting in our beds. We do it separate off the side. And I think the next slide shows a test. Yeah, so you can test this, and if you're doing horse manure and you're not sure of it, compost it first. You can take a sample of it, mix half of it with soil, and then do a couple controls with just plain soil. And like I said, radishes are the fastest growing things. It usually takes 4 weeks to grow a radish. And if, let's suppose that this is your plain soil and this is your compost, you're doing well. If it doesn't look good, you've done something wrong, or it's just not ready. So if you're doing manure, it's probably got something in it. If it's got, your compost just might not be ready to go. And the other thing though, if you do need the space, like I've had times where I've had my compost and I needed my space, I've taken my unfinished compost and I use what we call a top dressing. Use it like a mulch, add it on top of your soil, don't dig it in like you should with compost. Leave it on top, and it'll continue to break down, and your nutrients, as you water it, the nutrients will soak down into your plants and help them out. Question?
No, what you were saying about using unfinished compost, because I like banana peels and fruit stuff, I'll just throw it on top of the.
Yeah, I would at least compost it for a little bit first. It's not terrible, but especially if you're doing edibles.
But if you've got unfinished compost, did you say the top dressing?
Yeah.
That's okay?
Yeah. It's better than with your finished compost, you want to take that and add it to your soil kind of before you plant.
Mm-hmm.
Get all that organic matter and all those nutrients into your soil where the roots are going to be. Mm-hmm. If it's not finished, not ready to go, put it on top.
Gotcha.
It'll eventually get down there. And then next season, you can add it in. Should be fine by then.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking like for the trees, the mature trees,
Yeah, it's not as bad for mature trees.
Gotcha.
That's what I thought, I think.
Okay, these are the vouchers we give out, and you may want a second one. I'll explain why. Like I said, I think it's about 3 feet tall. It looks about 246 ounces, which I believe is close to a cubic yard. I'm not sure, like conversions aren't that great. And like I said, it can just be wrapped tighter if you don't have the space and want it to be a little bit smaller. That's fine. If you want to. Go ahead.
This is a pile of compost here that's about 6 weeks old. This black structure, this is about 115 degrees, but I turned it a week ago and got up to 129 this week, so it needs to be charged with what I'm going to do today.
Look at what
This
he's wearing.
structure right here is called a geo.
And I love his socks.
From Montgomery County, in this case.
I'm guessing you got high school science.
This is a geo bin, and what we're going to do today is we're going to try to achieve this. So, in this pile, what we try to achieve is 3 parts carbon, these for the most part, plus 1 part nitrogen, green vegetable waste, plus water. Our water's turned off in the garden, but I brought some water, plus air. This thing needs air, and that's what we're doing today. We're turning this pile so that the part of it that's inside that you'll see in just a minute that's hot can get turned and more air can be put in there. If it doesn't get air, it can start to stink. So if you have compost that has vegetable scraps in it and starting to stink, you need to turn it like this and get some air. So all you do is take the stakes out, like we're doing right here. It's about a minute. Then you let the geo bin. The bin will stay put because it's wet. For the most part, it will stay put. can't get it tight.
I've been
The
wondering
reason
how
my
to
temperatures
tip
are
in there
higher
and
than they
shove it
are.
out. It's really uncomfortable to do that, but he's just gonna put it back in.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot more convenient than if you've got two.
High
You
temperatures,
don't even have to
you
all
need at least 4 by 4 by 4. And I just can't do that. But still, this is bad. So I'm going to
watch the
start.
composition and watch the ends.
I'm charging my pile now. I'm adding more carbon, more nitrogen in about a 3-to-1 ratio, and water, and I'm getting air by turning everything. So I'll start by putting some carbon on the bottom and mixing it up. It has a tendency, if it's wet, to stick together, and that's not good because then it all anaerobic. You want to get air in there. Okay, I got a bed of carbon now. So I start with vegetable waste from the kitchen. Okay? So just kind of spread it around here a little bit on top of the carbon. Put about half of it in here. It will need some water. So our water in the garden is turned off. So I brought it down today. Water in there. More carbon. You're going to notice something about the pile in just a minute, but not the stuff right on top. You always, whenever I put it in, I mix it up. These are just leaves from my yard, and my neighbor's yard. I take care of it. Okay, so I'm shooting for about 3-to-1. Uh-oh. So I'm not starting to notice now. I don't know if you can pick it up on your camera, but there's steam coming out of that pile. There's steam coming out of this part. Can you see it here?
Yeah.
Okay. So, more nitrogen. More water. More carbon. Now, if you're not a strong person and you think this looks hard, it's only as hard as you make it. You can pick up 1 pound of leaves with each stroke of this tool, or you can pick up 10 pounds. So, it depends on how big you are, how strong you are, how long you want to keep doing this. Pick up big spade balls. Just go back.
You can see he's in some good decomposition already. There's purple in the original pile right in the middle.
And it's starting to lose its identification in the middle. You can't really tell some of it leaves, some of it doesn't look like leaves. Your compost is going to be done when it doesn't look like your ingredients anymore. And that could take you a few months. I forgot to mention that what we're doing right here is called hot composting, obviously. But why it's called hot is because we get temperatures high enough to complete the composting process in a much shorter time than you can like with just a pile of stuff. If you don't have the right combination, if you don't have air in it, if you don't have water in it, it will compost if it's got, things like weeds, grass, and stuff. It will compost. But it'll take a lot longer. I want to do it as fast as I can. I want to try to get this ready. This is December. It's 43 degrees today. I want to try to get this ready. Put into my garden at least as top dressing in the spring. I don't want to wait 2 years for the compost, which is what a backyard pile might take you. So you can see the stuff, especially in the middle, it's really smoky.
I'm gonna stop it now, go ahead. Next slide. It doesn't take 2 years in Florida just because of our heat and our climate. And I think you get the idea. He's just gonna keep going and adding layers and adding more stuff to it. But one of the things you may want to think about is saving stuff. That's why I have that third bin where I'm always breaking up leaves and chopping up palm fronds and putting it in there. And if you can save some, if one day you have a couple apples, put some stuff. We're talking with him who's saving stuff in the freezer for stock and vegetable bone broth, chicken broth, whatever. But you can save stuff and add it, to try and do hot composting when you get these bins. And I've actually stopped, I bought a pickup truck this year because I've been doing so much gardening, and I've stopped off and I've actually rigged up, some neighborhoods, they have that little ditch where they throw all their yard wastes, and then once a week they come around, the city comes around and collects it, and I've actually stopped it, stolen that sort of stuff, because I'm like, oh look, free garden supplies,
Exactly.
So feel free, I don't know the rules, I may be getting in trouble, but, so, anyways. Go ahead. So I was going to delete this slide, but I realized it's kind of interesting. It shows my thinking. We talked about why not use animal products and oils. Why I don't like in-bed composting because of the nitrogen taken by your composting. Food sources. Like I said, I know a woodworker who I get their wood shavings from, and when I get horse manure, because there are stables around here that have to, you have to pay to get rid of your waste like that. So people would rather just give it away than have to pay for it. So I do go to a couple stables. I do the first time I meet them. The good news about horse stables is people who afford horses, they can afford to spend really good money on really good food. So most of the time, it's not going to have pesticides in it. But I don't know for sure. So the first time I got my supply from them, I composted it and I tested it just to make sure I didn't spread it out to my 60 beds at garden at work now. Because you might be putting herbicide, of course, herbicides in every bed within it. There's something called chip drop, which basically when tree trimmers trim trees and then mulch it up, they have to pay to dispose of that too. They would be happy to give it to you. I think most people tip them $20, $50 or something. You do have to get a whole dump truck full of it. You need a place to put it. But it's another free supply if you've got a neighbor you want to share with. It's a free supply. Stables. The city of County has adopted tree events 3 times a year. You can only do it once. You only sign up once, but they give out native shade trees. They give out mangoes, carabolas, all sorts of fruit trees as well. You can get those through there, and they just finished the last one, so they'll kind of have to wait about half a year for the next one. And then, of course, something I earlier was asking about coffee grounds, which are fantastic for your compost. A lot of coffee shops will give you their coffee grounds as well.
The county also gives out free Christmas tree mulch at select locations. Yeah, when they come around and collect Christmas trees, they will wind them up, and then sometime usually in March is when they're available. The piles are available at certain
That's my
places.
list. That's great to know.
I think the Starbucks in Miami Shores has used
Grounds
coffee
for your
grounds
garden.
that you can pick it up.
Grounds for your garden. They put it back into the sacks and
Yep.
the beans and all of your doings.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm leery about recommending restaurants, unless you know it's a vegetarian restaurant, because they have to separate the animal waste from the plant waste, and I don't want to mess with that. And if you know anything about restaurants, they're too high stress. Asking them to separate that for you is just not true. But coffee shops are fine. Okay, and the last slide. Oh, so this seminar was actually scheduled for a different date, and they printed out vouchers, so the vouchers have the wrong date on them, but it's not important. But please wait until the 22nd. What's going to happen is you're going to write your names, you're going to sign up. You have to write your name real clearly, because they have to take that name, type it into a list, and send it off to the Doral, the center where you can pick it up from. Give them until the 22nd to make sure all the names have gotten over there, and then when you go there, you have to show your ID, and it has to match what you sign up here for. So please make sure when you do sign up on my list, you sign up clearly, legibly, so that the agents who are going to do this can read it. I do have an evaluation form as well, if you could fill those out for me too, and you can get that reviewed in. And the last slide is me. So this is our extension office staff. Some of the agents who work there. There's a help desk. If you have any other kind of problems, send an email to dateMG@ifas.ufl.edu. This is a good spot to take a picture, by the way. And they can, if you've got like leaves that are turning color or a bug you don't recognize, take pictures. You don't have to go there. You can just send them pictures, and they'll help you out with that. This is my information. If you want to email me, I'm happy to help you out and answer any questions that I can.
Thank you.
So like I said, your name has to be clearly on this, I'll put this in the back of the sign-up sheet. That's just another.
I'm not gonna.
Kind of, that's just another. Sign up for the vouchers right up here.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Yeah, so I mean, but I just wanted to.